get a gold pen on my 25th year, and first thing I did was file a grievance with the White House.
You would.
Wait, that I said.
We'll begin in 1 minute. Call the regular council meeting of January the 23rd to order. Ask for a motion, please, to approve the agenda. Councillor Adie, Councillor Rondawa, all in favor? First of all, any additions, deletions, comments? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Just a note for people watching, Councillor Forrester is joining us, but electronically. She is traveling on business, but she's still able to participate. With that, I would call for a motion to recess to Committee of the Whole. Councillor Cunningham, Councillor Skelton-Morven, any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. We're into the Committee of the Whole. Committee of the Whole is a chance for council to have to deal with issues in greater detail in a slightly less formal setting than in a regular council meeting. It's a time also for people to bring presentations. If you're presenting to council tonight, I want to remind you that the meetings are televised. It's important that you use the microphone. It's important that you introduce yourself and the organization that you are representing. All questions or comments need to be directed to myself, to the chair, and then I will determine who may or may not answer on any particular issue. We do ask that you try to keep your presentation as brief as possible. We have other business that needs to be completed tonight. Also remind you that at this particular, at the Committee of the Whole, no decisions are going to be made. This is an opportunity for us to discuss and to listen. Council will be able to ask questions of you. Finally, as always, we always like to make sure that this is a good, safe meeting, a good place where people can feel they can voice their opinion without any sort of feedback, negative feedback that would discourage them from voicing those opinions. So ask everybody in the room to work at making this a good, safe place to have a good conversation. With that, we have a single delegation this evening, and that will be Paul Legace with regards to rent evictions. And Paul, if you would come forward at this time. And of course, whoever else is part of your delegation. Absolutely.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Just a matter of formality here. Can we have the agenda adopted?
All right. I'm trying to get through this too quickly. All right. I would thank you. A motion to adopt from Councillor Skelton-Morven and Councillor Niche. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. Thank you very much for coming. Turn your mic on. And again, identify yourself and the group you're representing.
My name is Paula Gase. I'm the legal advocate and coordinator for the Prince Rupert Unemployed Action Center. And with me is Mr. Arnold Nagy, our partner there, and he's our Aboriginal advocate. The reason we're here tonight, on a busy month, I get 5 evictions that are questionable. In the last 2 months, I've had 40, and most of them had to do with renovations. So it's an exceptional number in 2 months. I don't even know if I had that all year. This is why we're here. I'm going to let the folks briefly speak, and then what we're actually proposing. These folks are from Harborview, but they're not the only place. We just dealt with another renovation situation with 8 families. It looks like we have a good settlement. And that's the thing. I'm personally not against landlords and developments. I just think somehow landlords are more reasonable than other landlords. So it's not. And again, anything we say about Harborview, I understand he's following the law, so we're not questioning that. But I'd like our folks from Harborview to say a word or two. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing us here today. I just wanted to give an introduction. My name's Arnold Nagy, Arnie. I'm the Aboriginal advocate here in Prince Rupert. Beside me, Sylvia Scodane. Calder. Scodane. My apologies. I owe you some fish. We asked Sylvia to be with us today because in our cultural ways, the elders sit with us because they are the knowledge keepers, the language keepers, and we have never allowed them to sit behind us when we discuss issues of their concern. And she has some statements she would like to make. I just wanted to make that clear. That's why, and then Mike will speak after that. But I wanted to recognize first, before we begin, that we are on the unceded territories of Lakwalam, the 9 allied tribes of Lakwalams and Metlakatla, and I'd like to recognize that fact as a guest that lives and earns my keep here on Tsimshian territory as a Haida. That acknowledgement is made tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, what did I say?
Tell them your name. Just speak into the mic. Tell them your name.
This is Sylvia Scadine. I'm a I'm an elder and I'm 77 years old, and I got the word to stay after they evict us. I can't afford to move because my rent's good right now, but I can't move. So I have a hard time right now because my husband's in a manor and I'm just living on my pension right now. So I don't have nowhere to go right now. So that's all I can say now. What I don't know where I can go. If I could get a place that costs so much in the village, the town. I stayed in Harborview since 2006, and I've been there, and now they want us to move, and I can't afford the places now. It's 1,300, 1,100, 2,500. I can't afford that. I can't live like this. I don't know where I can go right now. So that's all I can say now.
Thanks, Sylvia. I think as time progresses, this community this year, you're going to see the same issue come forward more and more often, and that is seniors on fixed incomes, single incomes, trying to find affordable housing in this town. And it's coming to the point that an elder like Sylvia should not have to face the option of being homeless. There's so much wealth in this community. It's unconscionable that what we see happening and people being put out on the street into a market with less than 1%. To be honest with you, if I didn't own my house, I couldn't afford to pay the rent market. That's being asked today. And I work 52 weeks out of the year, full time. And that's the reality that's coming. But for elders, those that have family members, as Sylvia at Acropolis, her husband's income is taken and used to cover his costs at Acropolis. So she's left going from a 2 income to 1 income, not by any things that she has done wrong. And now that she's being faced with this, and I just wanted to thank you, Sylvia, for coming up. I know how difficult it is, and hope that your message and the councillors and the mayor and others in this city administration understand the importance of the discussion we're going to have later on with Paul. But I'll pass the mic down.
Thank you, Ernie. My name is Mike Hagan. I've lived in the Harborview apartments for well over a decade. I'm the second longest person to live there. First off, like our friend here said, there's 1% vacancy rate. That's maybe one family, one unit out of 11. And this is just one of 6 buildings that they want to renovate. We're individuals, we're families, we're working class, we're the seniors, we're the people that help keep this community strong. Again, I'm the second longest tenant in this building, and I honestly don't know where me and my neighbors are going to go. We're here to ask the city council, are they here to protect our community or protect the investment of outside investors? Thank you.
So this situation, as I say, this is just one block of 12. However, there's 6 blocks that this is going to happen to. And 6 times 12, we're talking 72 families. It's not going to all happen at once. And I appreciate the owner looking to stagger that, because otherwise you would have a disaster beyond measure. But that's 70 families. And that's just there. So I want to be clear. The owner made an offer that is way above what the tenancy branch permits. So this is not, he doesn't have to do that under Residential Tenancy Act. Under the Act, if the eviction goes through, folks are entitled to 1 month. So a lot of these folks' rents are $620. That's their entitlement. The owner has offered $2,000 to these folks, which he doesn't have to. But from the tenant's perspective and the advocate's perspective, $2,000, although generous in many ways, it doesn't cover a damage deposit, first month's rent, and moving costs. A lot of these folks are working class and seniors, and they just don't have the income to even do it. And that's why we've negotiated some things in the past successfully, but that's why these protections need to be there. Even if they want to move, they have a place to move, and it's affordable. Let's say they all got that. They probably most of these folks can't do it because you can't move for that price with those costs. So that's the first challenge. Now, I'm going to try to propose something rather than getting stuck. But there is a lot of folks that believe they had protection. The city's website clearly said, effective April 26, anybody's entered into agreement, or if there's a renovation and the landlord's entered into agreement with the tenant under the same terms or favorable terms and does the renovation, they can move in at the same cost. That was the exact wording right off the webpage. Or to take care of accommodations in the meantime and move them back in at the same rent. It clearly says below that, in addition, landlords who have met all the above conditions, the two clauses I just stated, under the City of Prince Rupert's bylaw must also abide by all legislative requirements of the Residential Tenancy Act as of July 1st, 2022. People believe they were protected from that. So what's going on here? Well, what New West did with New Westminster, which the local bylaw is based on, they repealed that section. Now keep in mind that was written prior to the changes in the Residential Tenancy Act in July 2021. The New West bylaw came in effect in 2019. So, but the city was aware of this because it does reference the changes in July 2021. All that to say is, if that's not going to protect them, because it's not, a landlord can get the order. If they could do all the work for the city, it's easier to get an order, just repeal it. Because folks believe they had protection. I don't think there was any ill will here with this, but it did cause a lot of confusion. So, and that's what New West did. Now keep in mind, so that case went to the BC Appeal Court. It was won, and it was basically said in that decision that in April of 2021 that municipalities did have authorities to complement Residential Tenancy Act law. It was appealed again in November of 2021, and it couldn't, the Supreme Court wouldn't hear it. So that means municipalities do have the ability. So if it's repealed, which if it's not effective, just repeal it. So what's the solution? Well, New West's solution right now is the city's currently reviewing the Residential Tenancy Act provisions to determine what next steps, if any, are needed. That means they are looking to revisit this. And I think that's what I like to see. If that protection's not there, can we as a city, as a community, have some dialogue so something is there. I'm not saying nothing's there. There's some really wonderful stuff about minimum standard of maintenance and that. So that full kudos to that. I'm talking about the renovation issue. That's what I'm talking about. Can we have some dialogue in the community? Can we come up with something reasonable? Can we come up with something that complements the Residential Tenancy Act? Because right now, 70 families, multiple families, we know the condition of some of these buildings. We know people. Unfortunately, there's a lot of buildings that have just been neglected for a number of years. And people want to come in and invest in the community. But, it just hurts me to think that somebody's lived here all their life and worked and give everything would have to move. Where are they going to move? That's a whole other thing because, Kitimat, Terrace, Smithers, all BC's dealing with this. It's not going away. But if that could be brought in a community forum, revisited look, because now it's going to really set the stage. And but I think there is a medium that could be done. As I say, we have negotiated with the Pinecrest in the past. Obviously, those things doesn't suit everybody, but if there was something in the city power to do so, the courts have said you can. So let's have an open dialogue as a community, and thank you for listening to these folks. And it's going to be, I'll take care of the provincial side of this stuff.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah, and simply we're happy to have any of those dialogues or whatever, help with any forums for people, for landlords as well. I think everybody needs to participate. Yeah, and certainly work with council on that possible legislation. And I think you'll be seeing some new legislation from cities now because the changes that took place in July are starting to flesh out now. And I think that's what some of the cities and municipalities are waiting to see. So those decisions do get published. So,
yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Permission is thing. Say one more thing, guys. Imagine if you were a renter and you went home and you got a notice in your mailbox saying you had to be out in 2 months. What would you think? No if, answer, but you got to move. We got 4 months, if that. Think about that, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions, comments from council? Councillor Cunningham.
First of all, thank you very much. Thanks for coming.
Microphone, please.
Yeah, thanks very much for coming. At this moment, Paul, is there any other municipalities or cities in the province of BC with any legislation similar to what we printed but got sort of put aside?
I am happy to look that up for you. I don't always follow municipal politics because I've been kind of busy the last couple of weeks. But yeah, I'm happy to get some stuff, some material on that. I'd be happy to get into material where any municipality or city has such bylaws posted post July 2021.
I looked around and I couldn't find anything, and I know you were better at finding this stuff than me.
It's been a busy week. I really wanted to. Yeah, I can't even keep up with that. I try. I have a hard enough time keeping up with the provincial stuff, but this is some of the complication too in itself. You're marrying two systems or complementing two systems, and to be fully knowledgeable of both is tricky.
The
I see no reason why we can't revisit it and take a look at it. You know, like we mirrored U.S. ministers thinking the protection was there.
Yeah.
Then U.S. repealed Section 6, and we didn't repeal it. We put in Section 45, which basically does the same thing, but it's very confusing the way it was done. And, you know, when you look at it now, you think, what the hell is going on? Excuse me. But, you know, it's unfortunate, and I think we've got to revisit it and look at it just like U.S. Minister. And, you know, I, for one, would be open to revisit it and look at it and see what we can do. You know, it's a fun, you know, you and I have talked about it. It's a fine line you got to walk, sort of thing, and that. But you know, at the same time, we've got to protect the people that are living there, but also be crucial of those buildings have to be upgraded. Some of them are to the point where they're not even habitable, from what I understand, to a degree, and they have to be upgraded. Now, whether they have to be moved out of to be done or not is another thing, and that's something I think we should be looking at. You know, because you know, there's enough apartments there, and I don't see why people can't be moved around to fix things up and then put back in at a reasonable rent or that. You know, the city in the last 2-3 years has approved multiple housing projects. None of them been started. Lac Glam's on 11th, low cost housing there, 60 units, other stuff like that. We can only pass, rezone, and approve housing projects. We can't make people build things. And that's the hardest part, and especially for us sitting here, seeing this crunch getting worse and worse and worse all the time. I look at, with my gray hair, senior housing, you too, Arnie. And, you know, the thing is, with the exception of Cedar Village, in the last 50, 60 years, there's been no senior housing built. Wayne Place is falling apart, things like that. We've got to look at senior housing as much for Sylvia. You know, it's across the board what we've got to look at. We've got to look at marketing housing. We've got doctors and nurses that can't come here because they can't find a place to stay, and they can afford upscale rents. And you know, it's right through the whole spectrum, and it's the vulnerable people that are being hit the most, because we've got a lot of landlords now that say, hey, I can get double the rent, and they're doing it, and it's unfortunate.
I just note that UBCM, and I appreciate that the timeline isn't as helpful as it could be, but UBCM has a housing forum in Vancouver on April 4th and 5th. And so it is clearly an issue of import to other municipalities as well. Councillor Forster, I think you wanted to speak.
Thank you. I echo many of Barry's comments. I did just want to have a couple of clarifying questions, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay. The first one, I heard the speaker say that there's been about 40 questionable evictions in the last 2 months. I don't know if I understand what that means.
Yeah, I wasn't clear. So if a tenant hasn't paid their rent and the landlord wants to evict them, it's 99% of the time not questionable. So, or if there's a cause where there's a serious incident on the tenant perpetrated, I'm referring to things where it's debatable whether the eviction is necessary. I think, yeah. I should have made that clarification. I'm used to speaking to advocates, but thank you.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Councillor Forster.
Sorry. My other question, I think what I've heard is that some of these rent evictions are for buildings or places that genuinely need some sort of repair. Is that correct? I'm just checking an assumption. Like I'm just wanting to understand a bit more. Can people continue living in these places with no risk to their health?
Mr. Legace.
It's tricky. So thinking of the 3 last major situations, I think one of the situations was clearly needed. I think another 2 of those situations is debatable. Certainly work needs to be done. Nobody will dispute that. Does the tenancy need to end? That's the question. But is there anything that can further be done if the tenancy, that's the trick. I mean, I know there's vacant apartments at Harborview still being rented out. So, and the landlord's free to do that. I'm not suggesting any wrongdoing, but some of the buildings are in various stages there, so it's really dependent on the unit. And then when it goes before the residential tenancy branch, it goes to a particular arbitrator, and there's about 40 of them. And though they are unified, they're also like a box of chocolates. So there's a lot of factors. And it's really hard to be certain. But there is questionable cases, certainly. I dealt with, fourplex where, there could be work that was done, and the landlord just simply didn't want to pay the money and was told everyone to be out the next day. And I think in situations like that, that's where some of the minimum standard of maintenance can really be useful. The city bylaw portion, right now the residential tenancy branch is quite backed up. So when you have an emergency situation such as we dealt with last Christmas and the fire in the Angus apartments, which was very public, we had hearings for those, but they were way down the road. So I think, we can use the minimum standards of maintenance in those situations. And sometimes, it's a bit of tag team, and it's complicated. And but hopefully we could get some clarity on that. I know the city's working towards that, and I've been talking to them about that, how to get that info out to the community. But I think that's one aspect. I think that's a good aspect, and I think if we could readdress the rent eviction, it's hard. It gets gray, and then we know what it's like in the contractors up here. What is it a reasonable amount of time to do the work? What is a reasonable amount of time to do the work in Prince Rupert? Those are two completely different timelines. So that just makes it even more crazy because, maybe if you were on somewhere in the lower mainland, you could get this work done quick. But I know the pace up here. So how does that affect? There's so many factors that make it complicated.
Councillor Forster, was there anything else?
No, I just think it would be, I support, or I shouldn't say support, I would be open to having a further dialogue with community because I, like many people in our community, had thought that the bylaw that was passed last year meant something different than what it did.
Councillor Adey.
Thank you, Mayor. I spent some time, and Mr. Legase and I have had some conversation about this as well. I spent some time kind of going back through the process of developing the bylaw that we have currently. And it seems to me that the heart of the issue lies in what we hoped to achieve in Section 44 in terms of describing the ways in which we were trying to offer protections and offer something that resembled a fair balance between protecting the interests of tenants and at the same time allowing some room for improvements in the buildings to take place. And throughout that process, there's then the following section, which is 45, which really seems to undercut anything that we could choose to do. And that section 45, that language is basically allowing an owner to go around whatever we said in our language and go to the residential tenancy branch for permission to proceed. I think that's my understanding of how that works. And I know that later on we added some further language that would allow the city to grant an exemption. So I think that's been there, and I'm not quite sure why more wasn't made of it by us in terms of the tension that's created between those two sections. Because it seems to me that the outcome is what you've described. I think you're being fair. The outcome is we can say all we want about requiring landlords to do this, that, and the other thing in terms of protecting the tenant's interests. And I think you've been fair in pointing out that this particular landlord has gone above and beyond in terms of what they've offered. We end up crashing on the same rock, and that is that the developer can go to the tenancy branch and ask for permission that bypasses all of what we can determine at the local level. So what do we do about that? I agree that there needs to be continued dialogue because having both those sections doesn't make any sense. So it seems to me that dialogue needs to also include the provincial, starting with the MLA, I would think, but the provincial government has to be a part of that dialogue because we need to develop something which would allow communities to offer a fair and consistent and supportable or enforceable way of resolving these circumstances. We don't have that now, and I will share my and I'm sure that other councillors feel it too. There is no sort of lack of empathy for the circumstances that people find themselves in. I certainly feel it. I just think that we've got a situation where our struggle is how to reconcile two parts that seem to be working against each other. So I'd like to support the notion that we work to develop a dialogue around this, but that it include the provincial level in that conversation, because the problem seems to be derived from that part of the process. If that results in changes in the Residential Tenancy Act that address some of these problems that have emerged, that would be great. I don't know that. I can't read the future. So I'm advocating for that, and my frustration is that doesn't solve this problem next week, and I'm quite honestly at a bit of a loss to know how we get there in terms of the short term. I think the long term, some of the things that need to happen are fairly clear. I think the short term is the challenge, and I think that's really where we have to try and put our heads together to come up with some strategy that addresses that in the short term.
Yeah. Councillor Niche.
Well, I'm going to throw a little bit of a builder's perspective at this, and I think this problem started 20 plus years ago when our pulp mill shut down, our economy went south. People moved out of BC Housing and were able to rent complete houses for cheap because houses were available for cheap. Then BC Housing started tearing down their stock, and they didn't replace it because they didn't need it. It wasn't needed. And as our economy has gotten stronger, which is a good thing, unfortunately our housing has not caught up with it, and in some ways, I feel bad for anyone that loses their housing, but I also look at it from the perspective from being a builder that these apartments, one of the buildings has fallen down, so they are in need of repair, and I know that, and I know there's a lot of buildings in this town that are in need of repair. This environment is very difficult and very hard on buildings, um, and so you know this stuff has to happen for these buildings to continue on, and for them to continue to house people for years. These buildings need to be fixed. If they're not fixed, and I do this every day, and I see, you know, people want to live in their house when I renovate it for them. Well, sometimes that's just not possible. Sometimes it's not something that is an easy process, and sometimes people need to be and move out for this to happen. Now, where I think you know our problem is that no matter how many um, development, no matter how many things that we've offered to developers to, whether it be, you know, good land available to them for relatively cheaper prices than say the big city, whether we've given free building permits, we've given all these things to try and encourage people to build here. But I know myself, it's very difficult to build here. It's a hard town to build in. I'm currently building a place myself and for my own self, and it's taken me months and months and months to get out of the ground because of the conditions of this land. So, I think what we need to focus on here is BC Housing needs to get these places replaced that they've torn down. On Kootenay Avenue, I mean, it's been how many years now since they've been torn down? They need to be replaced. They need to be built. Those are the places where people should be looking to move into. And I think that the government, they spend so much time focusing on building beautiful buildings that they don't focus on what we need. We need housing. So we just need 4 walls and a roof, and people just need 4 walls and a roof to live in, and that's what we need here. And so I think that where the city and we should be advocating more to get BC Housing to start replacing their stock. Now, my understanding is the permits have been approved for Kootenay Avenue, but I haven't seen anything happening there. And I think that we need to maybe work harder at trying to get BC Housing to get going on these projects, because that is where our problem is here. If they replace their stock, then these buildings that are being trying to be fixed, they can be fixed, and they can be units for other people. We just need more housing. And from a city's perspective, we've done everything we can to offer incentives for developers to try and build stuff here, but it's such a hard environment to do it, and it sucks. And if I had millions of dollars, I would build more housing because I enjoy building housing, and I'm doing it right now on my nights and weekends. I'm trying to build rental housing. So this is something that we need to push the government more to. We don't need fancy buildings. We need 4 walls and a roof, and that's what they need to build. Now, if they come in and put up more modular housing on Kootenay Avenue to get things going, and that's what we need. So I think it's unfortunate that people have to move out of their buildings, but I also do understand that buildings need to be repaired. They do have a lifespan, and pipes and electrical are things that need to be. Otherwise, we're going to see other stuff like Angus Apartments where they catch on fire and burn down because you've got landlords that don't do nothing. So
I was just going to add, yeah, and I'm not going to. So the problem is there's a lot of low income folks that don't qualify for BC Housing, and that's part of it. It's working class. Like Arnie told you, he has a good job if he didn't own his house. I had a very public battle with my landlord last year. If I didn't win that, I was actually considering leaving the community. And I have a good job, then they pay us well, so it's not about that. Obviously we always want to think about the most vulnerable, our seniors, but there's a lot of people working certainly in that block, and they don't. They're not going to qualify for BC Housing. But, now we have a situation where middle class folks, single income earning middle class folks can't afford. I had a friend who was a teacher She had to move, get a new place, couldn't afford it, and that's a good job. So I think that's why it's just got so complicated, because we have and obviously the most vulnerable is the priority, but it's moving up it's affecting everyone. I think that's the thing that's really, when I have somebody in my office that's never been on income assistance, worked all their life, and they can't do it, and they're like in their early 60s, that happens every day. So it's complicated.
Yeah, fair comment. I want to remind council, the purpose here tonight isn't to solve this problem, but rather to hear from the group and question the group and learn from the group. And so certainly make your comments and everything else, but just remember, we're not going to solve this one here this evening. No, exactly. Councillor Cunningham.
I'll repeat what I said. We've got a long-term problem here and a short-term problem here. The short-term problem is going to be a lot harder to solve than the long-term one. Long-term, obviously, you got time to work on things and that. But what Councillor Neese said about BC Housing, they have to change their policies. You can have a 3-bedroom unit at BC Housing in the past. One single person can move in, but you can't have 3 single persons living in that unit. That was one of their policies. You start looking at policies like that, it could solve a lot of problems if they change those policies. The other side of the coin is they've got to start looking at the tiered levels they've got for income assistance and things like this. Like I said at the beginning, we should open the dialogue, look at it. That's a long-term solution. What we can do for these people right now, the short-term solution is, I don't know. I honestly don't know, and that's scary. Because I don't want to see anyone out in the street, and we've got to find some way of doing that. And I suggest the best way to do that is have an open dialogue, possibly with Mr. LeGrace and Mr. Arnie, Mr. Nagy, but and council, and have a workshop with it and hear some of their ideas and some of our ideas, because the more ideas we got, we might be able to come up with a solution. We don't know, but it's something we've got to look at, and we've got to look at it fast. And that's just a suggestion. Maybe in the next week or two we can get together and do something. But anyway, just a thought.
Mr. Nagy.
I just wanted to address something Councillor Nish said in regards to replacing their stock, like what's going on up on Kootenay when they tore those buildings down. But let's not forget the other buildings that they shut down that have been sitting there for how long that could be used for housing. They have done absolutely nothing after evicting all of those tenants that depended on that housing. Yeah. And there might be a couple of roof issues or something, but the majority of that building is cement. It's made with brick. That could have kept the pressure and allowed or off of the community in regards to affordable housing. But they decided to close it, and it's been sitting there doing nothing. You got gates around it when it should have people in there. And just one last thing before we call it a night, just to remind Councillor Cunningham, I'm not quite 60 yet, but I am an eagle, my crest. That's why I'm in my colors with the white head.
Yeah. Mr. LeGace.
Off the top of my head, when I was in Kitimat doing advocacy work, and it was the first wave of the potential LNG development, there was a housing committee there. Like we're saying long, short, this is ongoing, maybe that could be a forum, a housing committee. And that way, that could bring all sides to the table. I could bring council to the table. We could have landlords there, advocates. We could have different people represented. if housing's really important and if this is not going to be solved overnight, that may be a step. At least there'll be dialogue. At least people will be on the same page, and maybe something could be done out of that.
Thank you. Council, if there's no other comments, I'm going to wrap up. I want to thank you very much, particularly you, Sadie. Thank you for Sylvia, right? Sylvia, thank you. Yeah, I do now. Thank you for coming. Appreciate your being here. Council will take this all under advisement. And with that, I would call on council for a motion to adjourn to the regular council meeting. Councillor Cunningham, Councillor Niche, any discussion? All in favor? Meeting is adjourned, and we'll go back to the regular council meeting. Thank you very much. You're welcome to stay, but there's no great reason for you to stay. But if you want to stay for the regular council meeting, you're certainly welcome to. Thank you. Yeah. Super. Thank you. Yep. Yep. All right. We have so under the new council procedures bylaw, we actually have a couple of new things here. It may take people a little while to get used to. I'd like to think that there are enhancements. And one of those is item number 5, which is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on any item that's upcoming in this agenda. And so, we build an agenda for a purpose that we can use our time efficiently so that we can have good information and good reports. But what we do want to do is if a member of the public reads the agenda and says, oh, they're going to talk about this tonight, I've got some comments I'd like to make about it. At every one of our regular council meetings, item number 5 would allow you to come and make that presentation. So I will call. Is there anybody in the room who is here to address any of the agenda items? Hearing none, then I will move on to the consent agenda. And again, council, a change in the way of doing things. What you have in front of you is a whole series of correspondence, the old minutes, the staff reports that are for information only, and the idea is that we would approve them all in one motion under the consent agenda. If there is something on the consent agenda that you want to bring attention to, or if you have just a clarifying question, we don't need to do anything about it. You can just raise your hand. We can do that right now. If you want to actually debate or discuss it in detail, we'll remove it. We just have a motion to remove it from the consent agenda, and then we take it out, talk about it separately. So with that, I would call, first of all, on a motion that all the items on the consent agenda be accepted and filed, understanding you'll have a chance to remove or talk about whatever you want. Councillor Adey and Councillor Niche. All right. Are there any items that you would want to draw attention to or have clarifying questions around on the consent agenda? Are there any items that you want to remove for the purposes of discussion and debate? Hearing none, then I call for the question. All in favor? And any opposed? Carried. We now move on to staff reports that do require some decision of council. The first one is a report with regards to the 2023 to 2026 strategic plan. The recommendation is council approve the strategic plan and direct staff to proceed with implementation. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillors Niche and Skelton Morven. Dr. Buchan.
Your Worship, I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't have anything else to add to the report.
All right. Any comments or questions from council? Hearing none. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. We have a report from the communications manager regarding the summary of the Odd Eidsvik Park consultation and council support for the PRPA Community Investment Fund application. The recommendation is as follows. The council supports the rollover of the $50,000 of in-kind funding previously committed in the 2022 budget and support a city-led application to the Prince Rupert Port Authority's Community Investment Fund and other available grant opportunities based on community results, and that's specific to the Odd Eidsvik Park. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Adey, Councillor Cunningham, Dr. Buchan.
Your Worship, I was just conferring briefly with our communications manager to see if rollover was intended to mean pre-approval or waiting for the normal budget process.
It could be also pre-approval if council is willing to do that. Otherwise, we can wait until the budget process. It would just be with the caveat that we would have to include that as part of our application to the Community Investment Fund. Just a note as well is that the application was actually submitted in previous years and was a community-led application. The city is just helping with some administrative support to help complete the application and do a bit of a scope for the project. And we helped to lead the consultation that was provided in your report as well.
Yeah, my understanding is community/neighborhood led initiative that
yes.
The city's coming in behind and supporting.
Yes.
Okay. Are there questions or comments? Councillor Cunningham.
Well, I noticed in the park survey that we recently did, the park survey to find what community members wanted and that. A couple things in there, like section 1 had the lowest number of response back to it, but we had a public consultation about a park for them. And I just wondered where the connection was, if they were the lowest people responding to a park survey, but we had a public meeting. What prompted that public meeting?
So the public meeting was prompted as part of response to community advocacy for a park in that neighborhood. I'm not certain off the top of my head what the dispersal of the survey results were from, like which neighborhood, but there was a significant amount of interest in pursuing park redevelopment in that area, and it came to us prior to us developing the Parks and Rec master plan, I think, and survey. So that's part of the impetus for why the project is coming forward. After the closure of Westview School, there hasn't really been a playground in that neighborhood other than the slide and the swing that's on site there at Odd Eidsvik Park. So there's just been interest from the community. There were a couple of notes specifically with respect to Odd Eidsvik Park in the report that I can remember from the Parks and Rec survey, but I'm not sure about the overall spread of.
Well, I just noticed that. I just thought it perked my interest because if you look at the east side of town, you get down on Frederick. There used to be a playground right across from BC Housing. It was taken out. It's just a field of alders now. You've got Harborview with lots of kids living in there. No playground in that area. And I'm wondering if we should be holding some public meetings for these other areas of Prince Rupert about their concerns of public parks and that, considering they responded to the park survey a lot higher than section 1 did. I just think it's only fair if we're going to be looking at one particular area of town, then we should be looking at the other areas that have just as many or more kids. And the other thing is that I thought after looking at that, I thought would be interesting if you were to actually have a survey on parks, what kids need in schools, elementary schools and schools, because these are the people that use the parks, the kids. And when you look at the demographics of the people that answered the survey, there were very few kids answering that survey. And I think if as you could talk to School District 52 about actually saying, do you want to do a little project with the city and find out what kids would like to see in their playgrounds? What a unique idea.
It's fair point. I'm sure they'd have a lot of really fun ideas that would be difficult to implement, maybe. But just speaking a little bit to the process point, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan isn't complete yet. So again, this is a little bit early on in terms of that, and so the Parks and Recreation Master Plan will help to direct what the future of city parks looks like. This is just something that had come to us previously before that process was initiated, and so we're just looking to support following through with what the community had asked for.
Councillor Adey.
Thank you, Mayor. I understand from having dialogue with people in the Section 2 neighborhood, this is something that has been begging to be dealt with for a long time. I will offer just a little bit of a sidetrack to explain why I'm supportive of this initiative, but also cognizant of what Councillor Cunningham has just said. Throughout the last 3 or 4 years, I was one of the voices that very much wanted a survey done and some attention paid to the notion of where we play in this community. And I will tell you that one of the things that I was very hopeful that the Parks and Recreation Survey would produce for us is a picture of those areas of town that are well served in terms of parks and playground equipment, and those areas in contrast that are not well served. And I understood that it was undoubtedly going to produce the not really very surprising insight that Section 2 is not very well served, particularly since Westview closed. And the Westview, in fact, I know I have a family member that would want me to say that the local residents and parents of that school put a lot of energy into raising the funds for the playground equipment that went into Westview School. So there was a playground and park opportunity there, and that equipment got moved when the school closed, leaving nothing but, as you pointed out, a slide that wouldn't pass anybody's safety code now, and two infant swings that I remember driving by last year, and I think that somebody who perhaps should not have been trying to sit in them was needing to be released by the fire department. So what you have there is not a park, and the closest park is, you can say, well, you can walk over to Pine Ridge or up to Roosevelt. Well, that's not a neighborhood. That's not a neighborhood option. So I think there's all kinds of strong reasons why we should be supportive of a group that has undertaken to get the ball rolling to get some improvements done to that park. So I am supportive of that. The only point here in terms of the recommendation, I guess 2 points that I think we need to spend a little bit of time with. I think we have to understand exactly what we mean when we talk about the $50,000. I agree that it was a commitment that the previous council supported in a previous budget. I also recognize that we're not at the point of doing next year's budget, and I would want to make sure that we do that part right. I don't think that we should be doing exceptional budgeting for one particular initiative, that moving it outside of the regular budgeting process. So I think we have to pay attention to that. I will make the case when budgeting happens that we should honor that commitment that we previously made. So I want to be clear where I stand on it, but I do think procedurally we need to do it correctly. And the other point would be just the choice of words. Support a city-led application. I think I know what you mean by that. I also think I know what you don't mean by it. But I think it could cause some confusion. I'm just wondering whether we should consider just removing the city-led and say support an application to the Prince Rupert Port Authority. I do see this as a community group initiative. I think they started it. I think they have some ownership over it. I'm very supportive of the effort. And I think that would put us in a more comfortable place when we come to be dealing with the wishes that have been expressed by people in other parts of town. I think we need to do this in a way that allows us to be consistent so that we can support this in a way that is equitable in the future, supporting other initiatives in other places. I think we have to do both. I don't think we can just do this for one neighborhood and not do it for others. So I would like to see us support this. I would like to see us deal with the $50,000 in-kind funding piece in a way that's procedurally defensible. So I guess what I have to do here, I'm sometimes fuzzy on the procedure.
You're moving towards an amendment.
I'm moving towards an amendment. By golly, I will get there eventually.
Yeah, no, we'll get there. So, Dr. Buchan, have you got a recommendation on how to handle the in-kind funding piece of this recommendation? Do we strike it? Do we?
Your worship, I'm not sure why you would strike it. It's important, I think, to clarify that this is not cash. It's in kind.
Okay.
I'll ask our director of communications if she has any thoughts on this.
What we could do alternatively is to amend the recommendation, if Councillor Eadie is okay with it, to say that council supports consideration of $50,000 of in-kind funding previously committed in the 2022 bid budget, and support an application to the Prince Rupert Port Authority's Community Investment Fund and other available grant opportunities based on community consultation results.
Back it up. The council's say what the first part was.
I speak quickly, sorry. That council supports consideration of $50,000 in-kind funding.
Correct. Okay, so strike the rollover of, replace with consideration of, and strike city-led from the motion. So that's your motion to amend.
Let's put that on the table and see where it goes.
Is there a seconder to the motion to amend? Councillor Cunningham.
I'll second
Any
it.
discussion on the motion to amend?
Look, I have no problem with this motion. I think they need playground there. I'm just saying that when we did the park survey, it was looking at the whole of the town, and the other east side of town.
We're just talking about the amendment now.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry,
well,
just I'll get back to you, I promise.
Okay.
Anybody on the amendment? All in favor of the amendment? Any opposed? Carried. All right. Go ahead, Councillor Cunningham.
No, I'm fully in support of the in-kind. Don't get me wrong there. I'm just saying we did a survey of the whole town, and the eastern side of town needs parks just as much as any other part of town, if not more. And I think we've got to look at it. When you talk about kids walking to Pine Ridge or that, well, kids from Seal Cove have to walk all the way to Rotary Park or Mariners Park, which is quite a walk too. I don't think it's any different than any other part of town. I'm just saying that we did a survey. Parts of the town responded to that survey in a large way, and we should be taking a look at that part of the town too, because you see kids playing in the street at the bottom of Frederick Hill and things like that. It's dangerous. They've got no place to play, and things like that. And that part of town needs care and attention as far as playgrounds go too. That's all I'm saying. I support this park there. We need parks all over town. But I think when we did a survey, we have to pay attention to that survey too. That's what I'm saying.
Director Pucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the city manager, I just want to make sure that in kind does mean there has to be money put in the budget for it. In kind has to be budgeted. So the excavator work costs money. So it is all. There isn't an in kind contribution. It will still come forward as an item in the budget.
Perfect. Thank you. All in favor of the motion as amended? Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. You don't even have to move. We got a report regarding support for an application for funding to NDIT for Administration and Human Resources internship. The recommendation is that council supports an application at NDIT for funding to support an administration and human resources intern through their local government and internship program. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Rondawa, Councillor Adey, Dr. Buchan.
I'm just open and available to questions if you have any.
Okay. Any questions or comments from council? Councillor Cunningham.
There's no impact financially to the city at all. This will be strictly an intern for grant.
So the application also includes a contribution from the city of around $16,000, but the primary cost of the intern is borne by NDIT. So it's a relatively minimal cost in the grand scheme of hiring this person.
And then at the end of the day, it's going to become a full-time position?
Not necessarily. That's not what we've done in the past. I mean, I don't think we would.
Dr. Buchan.
Your worship, this is a position that is very much needed for HR. We were looking at actually putting into the budget the full amount for this position for this year. We found this grant which would cover the lion's share of the position for this year. Our goal and hope would be to be able to roll it over into next year because it is a necessary position for the volume of work that is required from that function. So for this would be contemplated for an increase in the following year.
Any other questions? Councillor Cunningham.
I tend to agree with you, but there's lots of positions in the city right now that we need to fill, including in the yard. When we saw what happened over Christmas and everything with our yard crews and all the emergencies they did in that, and we've cut that crew down to the bare bone. And I think, we need to look at the whole picture. But, I agree we do need a position like this also, but I'm also saying that we should be looking at other positions.
And you're through
Dr. Buchan.
Your worship, we agree, and we are, and we are in a I would say, frankly, in the last 12 months, in a constant state of recruitment for positions in the yard. Very difficult. It is top of our mind. So we are approaching it in that manner.
All in favor? Sorry, Councillor Forster.
That's okay. Thank you. Just really quickly, Mr. Mayor, I'm curious. Would this posting include an inclusion for somebody of all ethnic backgrounds, or do we have a statement like that, or is that something we would be taking on, or would NDIT be selecting who is coming to us?
So the program is administered through NDIT, but I do believe that they have equitable hiring practices. I can look into that though and get
I'm sure.
back to council.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
All in favor? Opposed? It is carried. Thank you very much. Report from the corporate administrator. Request of support. The council directs staff to provide a letter of support to the PR Prince Rupert Performing Arts Society for their application of the NDIT Cultural Infrastructure Program for their Please Be Seated project. Motion to that effect, please. Councillor Cunningham, Councillor Skelton Morvan. Any questions, comments? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We now move on to bylaws with the City of Prince Rupert Road Dedication Bylaw number 3512. The recommendation is that council gives second reading to the City of Prince Rupert Road Dedication Bylaw number 3512-2023, and that council proceeds to public notification and ministry referral. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Niche, Councillor Cunningham. Any discussion or questions? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. City of Prince Rupert Road Dedication Bylaw number 3513. Recommendation that council gives second reading to the City of Prince Rupert Road Dedication Bylaw 3513-2023, and that council proceeds to public notification and ministry referral. Motion, please. Councillor Rondawa, Councillor Adey. Any discussion? Councillor Niche.
My question is does this impact the one building that is, I believe now a automotive shop? Have they been contacted, or is there any impact to them as far as closing the lane behind their building?
Your Worship, if I can defer to Director Pucci.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Mr. City Manager. This public notification is going out. We will be putting it out as per the public notification, and any discussion, if they want to come forward, we can have a chat with them. There is a partial closure, but it is not behind their building. If you look at it on an aerial, you can see that it's not closing off all of their access in behind. There's just sort of right beside their building, and that's about it. Thank you.
Any further questions? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Finally, item number C, the official community plan amendment bylaw number 3514/2023, that council give first and second reading of official community plan amendment bylaw number 3514 to allow exemptions to development permit guidelines in heritage core character area related to building color and materials for businesses subject to internationally or nationally established brand guidelines. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Randhawa, Councillor Adey, Dr. Buchan, did you want to make any comment?
Your Worship, I'll defer to the Planning Manager.
Thank you.
Thank you to the Mayor. So this amendment provides an exemption for color and material development permit guidelines within the Heritage Core character area for internationally or nationally established corporate or franchise brands. And the intention of this amendment is to support the investment of these corporations or franchised in city core areas, as these entities may be constrained by their national branding guide requirements to meet form and character guidelines, which may halt development. In these cases, in these cases, the color guidelines in our OCP actually act against, can act as barriers to investment or city core, which is not in alignment with our goals for revitalization in the downtown core. The existing guidelines that are in our OCP are derived through community input and are therefore important to maintaining cohesive character in the area, and consequently, these exemptions would not apply to all buildings, so they would not apply to buildings hosting entities that are not restricted by international or nationally established brand guidelines, and it provides only an exemption to these cases, as we've seen cases where it affects development's ability to proceed. This would add no additional cost to the budget.
Right. Did I get a motion? Yeah, I did. Yeah. Oh, that's right. I did. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Thank you very much. Any comments? Now I'm going on to item number 10. Any comments, questions from council before we adjourn? Councillor Nish.
I just wanted to say thanks to all the city staff and contractors who helped remove all that crazy amount of snow we had in such a short period of time there the other night, and anybody else in the community that helped their neighbors or helped their friends and move some snow, and it was a lot of snow in a short period of time, and kudos to everyone that helped and got our town up and running again.
Councillor Cunningham.
That goes out to Councillor Nish. He came over and helped plow the driveway in my front of my house after the city crew went by and put all the snow back that I'd shoveled out. But also, I'd like to point out on the same note that we again saw sections of town that were not cleared by the owners of property that don't live in town. One being the one down on McBride and 3rd. And with us expecting snow again next week, as in the forecast, I think something should be done about that, whether the city clears it and gives them a bill, or we contact them to hire a contractor or fine them or whatever. But that section there, especially with seniors and other people walking down that hill past the dry cleaners, it just turns into a skating patch. I've seen people fall there numerous times, and I just like that taken into account.
Perfect. Dr. Buchan.
Your Worship, I can advise with respect to the property that Councillor Cunningham referenced. The bylaw has sent out letters to the owners, and the next time that happens, we are now in a position where we'll be finding.
Councillor Cunningham.
That's not the only place, but bylaws being on top of it pretty well. I noticed that. Another thing, if this is going to be our norm in winter with storms of this magnitude, and it looks like this is the second year in a row it's happened, we're going to have to come up with some sort of plowing program so that the businesses on 3rd Avenue, when the plow goes down, doesn't build up a wall that people can park their cars but can't get into the businesses. Our businesses have struggled through pandemic and everything for quite a while, and I don't know how we deal with that, but I've had people complain to me about, people can't get into my store or can't get into my cafe because there's 3 feet of snow on the sidewalk. But just something we'll have to look at.
Any other questions or comments? I'd just like to give a very brief report on, I attended the 20th annual BC Natural Resources Forum, Prince George. I was at the original one 20 years ago, and it was interesting to see, what took place there. Over 900 delegates from across British Columbia and beyond. The Premier spoke at the Premier's dinner. I had a chance to quickly say hi to the Premier and remind him of our concerns, as I did with Minister Cullen as well. Had more time with Minister Cullen, who is well acquainted with our issues, in particular the RBA. Also had a chance to speak to members of the opposition, attend the minister's breakfast. There was a direct meeting with BC Hydro, the Northern Medical Trust. I was able to talk to the president of CN, Tracy Robinson, and remind her of how important. I didn't have to remind her. She agreed with me that Rupert is a critical part of their infrastructure. There were a lot of other meetings. One of the opportunities I had was to meet with the mayor of Prince George. And in the past, Prince George and Prince Rupert have been two formidable partners in pushing for the strength of this corridor and the rail routes and the shipping through this port. And so it was good to establish that relationship. I had lunch in Terrace on the way back with one of the other co-chairs for the Resource Benefit Alliance, and we are lining up what we hope to be ministers' meetings. When is that? I think in a week and a half, roughly. And then finally, I just want to give a shout out to the Rampage. I've had the chance to speak twice now, and albeit their final game is not their final game of the season, but as they do this month of push around raising funds for cancer. When I spoke the last game, they had me announced before the game started that they were up to $18,000 raised. I'm sure that they're many times over that, and I will have the privilege of announcing, I believe I will have the privilege of announcing the total again at the upcoming game. And that's my report. If there are no other questions or comments, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor Cunningham, Councillor Niche, any discussion? All in favor? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much, Councillor Forster, for joining us. Enjoy your evening.